I think that 90% of podcasts fail and don't break through because people think about them as a one off show and not something that can sustain with its own identity over tons of episodes with a repeatable format. When we started Obscurum at the very beginning, it seems like it's been a long time ago. I first started developing this documentary podcast in 2019 and 2020, but always from the beginning, I didn't think about it as a one off story. I wanted it to be something that could live with its own original seasons as a brand. And that's been the mindset that I and my team have had with this from the very beginning. You put a lot of investment in building a podcast. And when it comes to narrative podcast episodes, that's episodes that are one story over one arc. It's so much work to put in for those episodes. And you want to figure out if there's a connective tissue that can keep the DNA of this brand you're building, in our case, Obscurum, going. And what other stories truly fit into that world. And that's always been in the back of my mind. My name is Gabe Lenners, and I have a company called Lenners Entertainment, and we are producing this series called Obscurum. We launched Obscurum Invasion of the Drones with Imagine Entertainment and iHeartMedia. It's a narrative podcast series about some strange drone incursions that started lighting up the Midwest in late 2019 and 2020. We are in this right now. The podcast did well, and we're figuring out the direction of where we're going to go for future episodes. I had that question. In the early days of writing the first season, do we think about this as the one-off story and just put the podcast out, let it sit? Or can this be something that sustains, that audiences get excited about? If you think about the way that people listen to podcasts, they binge it. I will listen to a narrative podcast season and I'll think, well, what's the second season going to be on? Like Serial or To Live and Die in LA. And I'm always thinking about all of these different topics that can live in this one ecosystem. It's kind of a catch-22 because, in the narrative or documentary podcast space, you have to really be thinking about this because you don't know if you're going to have success on that first season or not. And you want to build, or at least have the groundwork in place to build a pipeline. We're just starting to get into development on the next season of Obscurum, and there have been a lot of late nights. There's been a lot of phone calls. This is an investigative mystery series that kind of continues off of these first 9 episodes that we released in 2025. I think this decision between a show and a brand launch exists because shows are meant to be consumed once, and brands are meant to last. You're excited to see a new season of American Horror Story. You're excited to see a new season of Stranger Things. But if you have a one-off show and you're not thinking about how to extend your world in a podcast or a TV series or whatever you're doing, you have a one-off project. I knew the limited nature of Invasion of the Drones would end, and I wanted to continue to serve this audience who likes the strange, the weird, and figure out stories that are impactful and connect with them far beyond that first season. This conversation isn't just for narrative podcasts. There are so many types of podcasts: interview style podcasts, documentary, sports. If you are launching a podcast where you interview people and you're thinking about, like, we're going to get a couple mics and we're going to talk for a few hours and we're going to put it up and it's going to be great, you really need to think and delve deep about what those connective threads are, episode by episode. See what's working. See what the core DNA and brand identity of those episodes are that works for you. I mean, you can go through Apple Podcasts and see so many different podcasts are on Spotify that have had one season and it's a cool logo, there's great artwork, but the story just kind of ends. And then you have all these comments of people saying, hey, is there going to be a next season? And what's going on next? And you haven't built that whole kind of brand structure through the social media and the podcast. You leave your audience hanging and you have no way of growing beyond those first initial episodes. So as we look to the future of Obscurum across different seasons and what we really want to hone in on moving forward, we want it to be consistent. When the audience knows that there's a new season, we want them to be excited because they recognize the brand identity of what Obscurum is. And that goes from the artwork to the musical choices to the content choices to the format of how this narrative podcast is going to be.